Hi guys, Mark here, NSJC Vaping. Guys, I'm just going to have a quick little tutorial about how to build just a simple setup. I'm going to be building it for the purpose of this video on an endless mechanical mod. The theory and the practice is exactly the same. Okay, so I'm going to be doing it. Please bear with me because obviously I have to use my mind for building and my mind for talking, and we are men, we can't multitask. So, spool of wires, what you're going to need. You're going to need some ceramic tweezers, pair of pliers helps, screwdrivers for your deck depending on whether it's a flat head or a posi head, scissors, cutters, and most and foremost an OHM Reader. You know, I'm using the Geek Vape OHM Reader. Let's get started though. Most of you will buy your wire like this on a reel, which is great, handy for storage. However, you know, it's very bendy. So I like to pull off, I don't know, about 8 to 10 inches of wire for the build that I'm doing. I'm going to be doing a 6 wrap 22 gauge build. Just going to cut off, simple, but you notice you'll see the wire, lucky you. Try wrapping that round a coil jig and it will just give you a headache. So what I like to do is I like to spin it straight. So you can mount it in the jaws. I like to just bend the tab of the wire, so like a 90 degree, sit it into the claw of the drill, like so. Grab another set of pliers, grab hold of the end, like so. Spin it straight, and you'll start to see the wire twisting up. Now the thing to remember is to keep tension on the wire and release slowly. Run your finger along the wire right to the end, and it just stops the wire from pinging out and changing form, because we want a nice flat piece of wire. It's easier to work with. Once we've done that, we can push the drill to one side. So there we have it, nice bit of wire. We can then chop the wire dead in half, like so. Okay, take one bit of wire. I'm going to be wrapping this round effectively a 3mm drill bit. Everybody has a different way of doing it. People wrap coils in different ways. Personally, I have my jig in my left hand and I lay the wire directly in front of the jig, so the wire is closest to me, and then I then wrap away. Now the thing to remember is when you're wrapping wire, you want to wrap away and try and keep it as tight and as close as you possibly can, because it's going to minimise time that you then got to spend on your coil jig pinching your wires together, you know, getting them right. So try and wrap it as closely together as possible. So that's what I'm going to try and do now. We're going to go for 6 wraps like I said. So we want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And then always check. And when we're checking, you want, the way that I'm going to be building this, I want both of my tails to be coming out together. I always check from the top, so as you're looking at the wraps of wire. So we'll just recount them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? So we've done that one. We can then take that off the jig, and that's not going anywhere, we can lay it down. We're going to grab our second strand of wire and do exactly the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Recount 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and again finish them off. Perfect. And we can just cut off the tag that we use to drill. So there we are. There is 2 coils wrapped, ready to go. So all we've got to do now is mount them. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to get a close-up shot of me actually mounting them in. So let's just dive down to the mod and let's mount them. The deck is mounted on the Geek Vape 521 tab. Like we stated, this is a video for anybody that is really wanting to get into building it, you know, just wants to give it a try. So we'll just talk really briefly about this deck here. I've got a few more examples here, because they're all going to be different from different manufacturers. You will always have a centre pin and a negative pin. Now the easiest way to figure out what is what is your centre pin. You'll always be able to see a screw or an insulator cap. So on this one here, you could see the insulator, and obviously it's very clearly stated that this pin in the middle goes right through to your 510, and this is what makes contact with your battery. Okay, so that is your positive pin, and what you'll find is here in this case, this silver one on the side is directly connected to the body. Now this is your minus or your negative, and this is what grounds out or earths out your your coils. And again, on this battle cap on this scoundrel, your centre pin, alright, these are pretty good. You have coloured, so the blues are your negative, but the centre one is your positive. Your centre one is always going to be in the middle. It may look different, this is just mounted, this is just the way this deck is made, but again, your velocity style decks, which have 2 posts, you'll see one quite clearly goes down and goes to the middle, one just stays on the edge. But anyway, let's get going. So what we want to do is we've got these coils that we wrapped earlier, and we want to mount these coils. Now on this particular deck here, I'm going to mount them sort of oppositely. So what we're going to do is we're just going to mount them in, mount them roughly into place, just to gauge an idea. I like to eyeball it. I like to mount them in and kind of go, yeah, that's kind of where I want my coils to be, and then sort of make a mental note. It's about, I would say, I don't know, 10 mil, 15 mil, 10 mil maybe from the ends. I then take them out and then just take a rough gauge, get my wire clippers and go, right, okay, it's somewhere about there. So we'll just cut our tails off. It's just easier to work with, okay? So we're just going to mount it in place like so. I reckon I could probably take a little bit more off. We're in. Quite fiddly. So we just want to rest it in place. Then what I like to do is I like to just nip them up. We don't want to go too crazy at this point, for this very reason, because they tend to pop out. Okay, we can hold that in place and just get a little bit of pressure on these ends, just to stop them from keep flicking out. It is quite fiddly, especially if you've never done it before, but it will become second nature. Now forget how that coil's looking at the moment. That does not look very pretty at all, and we basically just want to push our whatever we wrapped around, whether it be a screwdriver, a coil jig like this. So we know that that's kind of roughly where we want. We can then put a little bit more pressure onto the wires. Okay, and once we've done that, we can then manipulate this coil where we want it sat and how we want it to look like, because aesthetics is quite high in this game as well. A lot of people like to see their coils looking nice, evenly and centraled. So that's pretty central. And there we are. That's one mounted coil, and then we just want to quickly nip them up, and there we go. Now the other thing to bear in mind now, if you're doing a single coil build, fine, great. Most people run dual coils. The thing that can trip a lot of people up is the tails that you saw me cut off earlier. I cut them off as an eyeball, a bit of a gauge, but you will see these little tails that stick out the back. Most of the wire cutters, as you can see with these, they're flat faced here, and there's a reason for that. They're meant to get as close to your post as possible. Now the reason for that is, obviously you don't want your tails then touching your other coil, because that is what we're doing, like direct ground or earthing out, or coil short, atomizer short, all of that you would normally see on your others. Only we definitely don't want that to happen. So that's why they make these, to allow you to get as close as possible to cut those tails. So we want to see no tails sticking over the other side, which is exactly what we've got here now. So the next thing we can do is grab our other coil. Now this is where it gets a little bit more tricky, because we've mounted one, we're gonna mount the other. And again, we're going to just roughly put it in place. We want it in the same place, but this is where your eyeballing has got to be a lot better, because obviously once you've pushed this in, it's very difficult to get to your other end of the tail. So you want to mount it in, mount it roughly in place. I just sit it over the top and eyeball it. So I go, right, okay, well I want to cut my lead roughly about there. You don't need to worry about your negative, because that's not going to your positive in this case, but that's not really going to come in play. So we're just going to push this into place. This is a tricky bit, this bit. So it's in, and it's in play, it's not protruding, and there we are. And the same thing again, we just want to nip it down just to apply a little bit of pressure to your wires, like so. Then we want to grab our jig, screwdriver, whatever we used, push it in, and then once they're in place, we can then lift them, push them to one side, raise them up, because we want to match it to the other side. Once we've done that, we can then cut our tails off again. So we can then manipulate the first one to mimic the one that we've just done. Now the next thing we need to do is pinch our coils up, make sure they're glowing out evenly. This actually has an 18650 battery inside it, so not only can I check my ohms on this one, but I can also fire this in situ. A little bit closer, I hope you can see a little bit better. And now we can see, I can actually tell you, you can actually see that this here, this bronze one here, this is your positive and this is your negative. Okay, let's pinch these coils. So the first thing to do is, you got to remember when you're doing these, you know, you don't want to just, you know, whack it in and hold it and hold it and hold it, you know, because what's going to happen, you know, you're gonna fry your coils. You're just gonna burn out your coils. So we want to pulse it. Okay. Now you're gonna need your screwdriver again, or your coil jig, and you're gonna need your ceramic tweezers. We're going to take this one here first. So we're just going to fire into it at the moment. You'll see it start to smoke. Don't be worried. That's what it's going to do. It's just while the wire heats up. So we're just waiting to see our red patches. Now instantly I can see that this one here is heating up relatively well actually. So what we want to do is now it's got some warmth in there, we just want to pinch on these coils. Okay, and now the idea is you want to keep moving it about whilst pinching, and we're compressing these coils. Now the reason why we're doing this is A, to get a decent path for the current to travel, and B, obviously a lot of people, you don't have to, you can have what we call space coils where you can run them out. I personally like doing it like this purely because I get a good dispersion of heat. So obviously once you've got your cotton in there, it's heating it up over a greater part of the coil there. So I keep working them until they are pinched up. So I'm going from one to the other, getting them. And then what you can do then is you can take your coil jig in there, and then because they're a little bit warm, they're going to be easier to move and manipulate. You can reset them if by pinching them you've taken them out of place, or like this one here, one side has got a bit stiff. So we're just going to tweak that up and pull it out. Now I will remind you, do not fire it while you've got this in. Try and get the coils evenly flowing. When I say evenly flowing, I mean we want the glow to be starting from the center of the coil and working out. Okay, so we don't want any glow on the strands coming from your positive pin. We want it working from the center of the coil out, and we want that to be happening evenly. The more times that you do it, you'll find that you're getting them right, but then it becomes how they look. Okay, so these are firing pretty good, and then I tend to blow on them just to cool them down. Okay, so if I now fire these, you'll see that they're glowing from the inside out, but these strands here coming from the positive pin are not getting red hot, and that is absolutely perfect. Yes, they could look a little bit prettier, but for the purpose of this video, this is purely designed to get you started. Okay, now the last thing to remember before you take the deck off is just run your screwdriver and make sure all your connections are tight, and then again fire it up again. Perfect. Now this is a 22 gauge Canthil build, and this is a 6 wrap coming out at 0.17. Now this I've built for a mechanical mod. It's the principle that I'm showing you. Whether you're building with pre-made Clapton wire or you're building with 22 gauge, 26 gauge, it's all the same. So the theory and the principle is the same. Your outcome won't always be the same. We'll talk about that more when we jump back up, but what I'll do now is we're just going to wait for this to cool down, and then I'll show you how to wick it. Now that we've done our coils, it's now time to wick it up. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to be using cotton bacon. There's so many others that are available. I just really like this. I like the way it peels off, and I get minimal wastage with this. What we're going to do is we're going to grab a bit of cotton. We all remembered that I built this around a 3mm essentially drill bit, or 3mm diameter. So I'm going to peel off this cotton bacon something like this much, a single strand of cotton. Okay. Now what I tend to do with this, so just sort of open it out a bit, make sure that there's no knottiness inside. Generally it peels off okay, like it has, and then I just lightly roll it. Now the thing not to do now is to go crack and flatten it down, because obviously we want maximum absorption from the cotton, and we just want to lightly roll it just to get it, you know, so all the fluffy bits are staying there all on the outside, and we just want to lightly roll it. Then take one end of the cotton and we want to just spin this up nice and tight, like so. So you'll just get a little bit of a fray. Okay, so it'll look something like that. We then want to take our deck, and I always thread my cotton from the leading edge. So where the wire comes down to either your positive or negative, I always feed it. So where the wire comes up and wraps in, I always tend to feed the cotton in, and we just want to poke it through. Okay, and then we want to pull. You'll find it will be a bit, you know, a bit of resistance. This cotton actually is pretty much bang on. There's just enough resistance there, and you'll just pull it, and then I like to pull it forwards and backwards very slightly just to settle it into place. It all depends on the depth of your juice well here. What I like to do here is roughly to the edge of the deck, and then a little bit more, a few mil either way, and then I just snip off like so. Okay, so we're left with something like that. So you've got a spun end on one side and a cut end on the other. Okay, don't worry about that, we're going to address that in a minute. So then we want to work on doing exactly what we did on the other one. So we want to spin it up like so, get it nice and pointy so it's easier to pass through the coil, spin the coils round and poke it through like so, and then forwards and backwards a couple of times just to seat the cotton. Okay, then we can use this as our guide, this bit of cotton here, so we can say, right, we're going to cut this end off to roughly the same as that. Let's spin it round and eyeball this to be the same. This is a rough guide at the moment. We can adjust all this. So at the moment, yeah, we're looking at it. Now what we can see, this particular deck has got a very, very deep juice well. If you compare it to the juice well on the battle deck, this is very, very shallow. So your actual cotton length is going to be a lot shorter compared to this. Now I would say, just by looking at this, we could probably get away with taking a little bit more off. So what we want to do is just pull the cotton slightly, ever so slightly, both ends, like so. So this is the side that we're looking at here. This is where this is where we want to be. So we just want to make this side look like this side, and there we go. Excellent. So we've now cut the cotton. Now by cutting the cotton, all we've done now is compressed all the cotton together like this. So if we now just poke this in, yes, it's going to work, but it's not going to work very efficiently. What I like to do now is take either a screwdriver or something pointy. Scissors work just as well, and I like to fluff the ends up because of where it's been cut. I like just to fluff them up like so, like this. Just point them in, work them until they're nice and fluffy like that. Okay, so it should look something like that. People do this in all different ways. Personally, I like to mount my cotton in place. So again, we want to take a pointy instrument and just push our cotton into the decks lightly. It should just sit in there perfectly, just like that. You shouldn't have to be pushing it down hard, trying to find, pushing it in. There shouldn't be any resistance. It should just fold into place just like so, just like that has. Sits in there perfectly. Now it's very crucial and very critical that air can pass underneath this coil. So remember to push your cotton just over to one side. Again, don't ram it into place, because remember, this is a wick at the end of the day, so we want the juice to flow up this wick as best as possible. You'll notice on this side here how it's sat in, there is no airflow, so we've just got to push it over a bit, just enough for the airflow to access the underside, because we want the airflow to flow straight through the middle and obviously up through the centre where we're pulling in. If you look at the top cap, you'll find these holes. We want the holes to obviously marry up with the coils and this airflow. So Excellent. Right guys, so once we've got our coils all built up and all wicked up, next portion to do is juicing. And I'm going to be using Dr. Fogg's watermelon tropical sherbet for this. So the key thing is, when you start juicing your coils for the first time, when they're all dry, I like to juice from the coil. So I like to drip my juice onto the actual coils. Now the idea of this is you want the juice to absorb inside the coils and soak the bit of cotton on the inside. If you don't do this and you don't concentrate over it, what you'll find is the first time you actually fire it, the cotton on the inside of the coils will be dry, and that's the first bit that's going to heat up. If you remember, we talked about, you know, you glowing from the inside of the coil out. It's going to be the first bit that you heat up, and that's where your dry wicking's going to come from. So they're pretty well saturated. Now once it's done that, then you can start dabbing on, and you'll find it will soak up very, very well. And this is a good way of tidying it up a little bit more. I personally sort of just like using the nib of the juice bottle just to push the wicks exactly how I want them to be, and where I want them to be on the outside for now. And it just gives you a chance to sort of flatten them down like so. You'll find that the juice will automatically just suck into those wicks, and then you can lift it up and you'll find that the insides are still dry. So I like to juice the inside so you can be a little bit more, you can actually flow the juice in from the insides, and actually it's easy if you know you lift the deck up like this. You know, basically what you're after doing at the moment is, if you see any dry bits of cotton, you know, you want them to be nice and saturated, because we don't want any dry hits, because it just doesn't taste very nice. That is it. That's priming all of your wicks. Now what I like to do at this point is just leave it and let it soak up. What we'll do now is we'll take it off here, and then we'll put it onto a mod, and then we'll vape it and see what she's like. Yeah, hi guys. So we're back up top now. We've got the build onto I've got it on a endless mechanical mod. Now before we get into discussions and actually firing of this build, I just want to make it very clear that what I'm actually showing you today is a principle. Like I said, it doesn't matter whether you're using 26 gauge, 22 gauge, pre-wrapped Clapton, or you've wrapped your own Clapton wires or anything like that. It's the principle is the same. Now the theory is not the same. This particular build that I've built on here is specifically designed for my mechanical mods. If you're new to vaping, please don't rush out and buy a mechanical mod. They are for advanced vapors only. The reason why I state this is they are potentially dangerous. I've got an RX200 here. This is what we call a regulated device. So in here is a chip in there, and it regulates. Think of it like a safety feature, backup safety feature. In this particular mod here, there is no such safety feature. So we build the coils to what specification we want. Whereas in here, although we still build the coils to what specification we want, inside here the chip regulates, and sort of, you know, it's almost like security for you. It just keeps an eye on everything, and if anything should happen, this will protect you. This particular mod won't. So just please bear that in mind. Sorry, but the actual the actual theory behind it is exactly the same. So the last frame you saw was me wicking all the coils. Now I've done that. Now before we fire this, we just want to make sure that, again, you just want to look over it and see that there's no dry bits of cotton. There isn't. What I like to do at this point now is I like to fire my coils, and I like to fire them and I like to watch the coils to make sure that they're both firing evenly and you're getting a similar vape up from each side. So we'll go ahead and fire it now. So there we are. So it's a 0.17 ohm build, which equates to somewhere in the region of about 27 to 28 amp draw. Now what I like to do at this point, because we fired it, the inside of the wicks has now got a little bit drier, essentially. So what I like to do before I take a good pull on it, I like just to drip a little bit more liquid just to refill the gap that I've just done by firing it. And then last but not least, we take our cap, we line our air holes up over the coils like so. So it should be symmetrical, so you should be able to look through the air holes and see your two coils, which I can. And then we go. There we are. Job done. Guys, I hope you liked the video. Any questions, please feel free to ask. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks ever so much.